What's with that look? People earning $60,000 a year are just poor, so get lost. A real scary face. It's scary how backward poor people are. That's right. Since you're here at the government office, why don't you get welfare for the bottom of the barrel? Said my ex-husband, John, and his current wife, Emily, whom I encountered at the city hall where I had some business. They kept mocking me together. They probably thought I'd cry and leave, but I was not about to give in to them. Unfazed by their abusive words, I opened my mouth to respond. What? $60,000 is monthly income. What? They both let out an absurdly surprised reaction to my words. You heard me. $60,000 is nothing like the old John. As I laughed loudly, John turned bright red trying to argue back. They continued to obsess over me. But I finally gave them the payback they deserved. My name is Catherine White, 50 years old. Currently, I run a cooking class as a divorcee. I married my ex-husband, John Grishnam, when I was 26. We had a daughter, Hannah. We were just an ordinary family. John was a salaried worker, hardworking but a bit short-tempered and prone to anger. He had a male-dominant attitude and sometimes made disparaging comments about me and Hannah. However, he had a strong belief that as a man, he had to be responsible. In the early days of our marriage, I found his masculinity and reliability appealing, and we lived modestly but happily. I met John through a senior colleague's introduction, a common way to meet. My colleague was worried about me for not having a boyfriend even after 25. Honestly, I wasn't much attracted to the idea of marriage. I was more inclined towards working than getting married. But back then, not many people thought like me, and many believed that retirement due to marriage was a woman's happiness. Moreover, my parents, every time they contacted me, started talking about marriage. I lived away from home due to work, and I also had concerns about marrying to reassure my parents. When I met John, I started considering him as a potential marriage partner. John seemed to have similar concerns at that time. Everyone is getting married, and the parents are annoying about it. Honestly, I'm not interested in marriage, but if I were to marry, I want that to be someone like you, Catherine. One day, John said that to me. We weren't exactly madly in love, but I thought we could be good partners since our views on marriage were similar. We decided to get married within a year of meeting, but we really had no money. Both of us had been living alone before marriage, so we had almost no savings. Thus, our wedding was just a small meal with only family members. Unable to afford a new home, our married life began with John moving into my apartment. Given our situation, I intended to keep working after marriage. John had agreed to this before, but after we got married, he started showing reluctance about me working. It was some time after we got married. So, when are you gonna quit your job, Catherine? His words were like a bolt from the blue. I replied, bewildered. I'm gonna keep working. I told you that. John grumbled and spoke in dissatisfaction at my words. But working makes it seem like my earnings are poor. Normally, everyone retires after marriage, right? You should too. It was a complete turnaround from our prior discussions. To John, who suddenly started saying that, I opened my mouth with a bit of annoyance mixed in. Why? It's a fact we have no money, right? You agreed to me continuing to work. But, my department head and manager, they already think you've quit your job. I can't just tell them to let you keep working. I was dumbfounded. John apparently told his bosses that I had quit. Nowadays, both partners working isn't unusual. But back then it wasn't as easy for women. John, influenced by others, began to think it was absurd for me to work and pushed me to quit. He even involved his parents, and they all opposed me working. You'll have kids soon, right? It's cruel to leave them in daycare while you work. Just quit your job. John's already told you, hasn't he? It's best for women to stay home. Even living far away, my mother-in-law would carelessly say such things. Despite my reluctance to quit, I ended up trapped at home. But John's salary didn't increase. Our reduced income directly impacted our lives. All I could do was cut back on expenses. Relying on John's sole income, we had to live frugally. "Is this all for dinner?" Before payday, seeing our meager meals, John would force a smile. "What can I do? We're out of money." "I'm working." "I'll eat your share." "I have to work for both of us," he'd say, sometimes even taking my food. Embarrassed about being broke, he took allowance from our budget. I was too ashamed to discuss it with anyone. John forbade me from telling anyone we were broke, so I couldn't borrow money. Of course, I had no money for personal expenses, and the stress built up with John not allowing me to work. Thinking about divorce, John said, "If we had a child, you wouldn't need to think about such things," suggesting a child despite our finances. Pregnancy in our situation would worsen our finances. I said it was too early, but I got pregnant, making it difficult to divorce or work. Yet, I adored our daughter, Hannah. Fortunately, Hannah grew up healthy and well. As John got older, his salary increased a bit. It was still below average, but we got used to saving. Being a stay-at-home mom, I could attend all of Hannah's kindergarten and school events. It had been a tough journey with a lot of sacrifices, but we finally achieved a normal life. Then, one day, John casually remarked, "Maybe you should start working soon. Staying at home all the time will age you fast." I was speechless at his words. "What do you mean? When we were struggling financially, you said it was shameful for me to work. Now you're telling me to work?" John got irritated at my spontaneous response. "What's wrong? Don't you want to work? Being a housewife is just laziness." I was shocked by his harsh words. It wasn't that I disliked working, but I just couldn't accept his attitude and words. "The new manager's wife works even after getting married and having kids. And she always looks so put together. And you, Catherine, don't you feel pathetic?" What kind of face was he making saying that? Had he forgotten what he had told me? There was so much I wanted to say, but with Hannah nearby, I desperately held back. "Fine, I'll find a job." With resentment, I told him, and John seemed smug, as if he had one. So, I started a part-time job nearby. A cook at a supermarket. Hannah was in upper elementary school by then. Even though she has grown up a lot, she is still an elementary school student. Still young and needing attention, and with housework to do. On top of that, working meant I was exhausted every day at first. Even seeing me like this, John didn't change. "What are you tired for from just a part-time job? Learn from me," he'd say arrogantly every day. But being a full-time employee is entirely different from juggling a job, housework, and childcare. When I used to work full-time, taking care of only myself, I don't remember being this tired. It's just part-time, but I have housework too. Can you help a little? Even just checking Hannah's homework would help, I told John. But he wouldn't cooperate. "Homework? That's a mother's job. Then, can you at least help wash the dishes? Tired from work and you want me to do housework? Housework is a woman's job." Whenever I asked for help, he'd push everything onto me, using the excuse that I'm the mother and a woman. Fed up with his selfish behavior, I gave up expecting anything from John. Then, a few years after I started working, Hannah fell ill. Initially, we didn't know the cause and had to visit several hospitals. Of course, I took time off from work to be there for Hannah. But even as I struggled for her, John's response was cold. "Is she faking illness to skip school? Don't take time off work. Your pay will decrease," he said. With Hannah visibly unwell, he showed no concern, just drinking beer. Eventually, we learned Hannah's illness wasn't life-threatening but required regular hospital visits. Having already taken much time off, and needing more, I couldn't keep burdening my employer, so I resigned. I felt I had no choice, but John was furious, hurling abuse at me. "You can't even keep a part-time job? It was just 3 years?" I know resigning wasn't ideal, but I had no choice. "No choice? You just wanted to go back to being a pampered housewife, didn't you?" No matter how much I explained Hannah's condition and our situation, John wasn't empathetic. Instead, he kept pressuring me to work. Struggling with the impossible situation and John's emotional abuse, I was desperate to do something. Then one day, Hannah said, "Mom, I'm sorry you had to quit your job because of me." I was surprised. I knew John's words had reached Hannah's ears, but I didn't realize they had made her feel guilty. Filled with regret and resolve, I knew I had to show her it wasn't her fault. "It's not because of you, Hannah. But I'm happy you're home. I want you to stay at home like before." Hannah. I thought hard. Then, I came up with the idea of working from home. But what could I do? After much thought, I decided to start a cooking class at home. I had always been confident in my cooking skills. With my experience living alone and working as a cook at the supermarket, I had a decent repertoire of recipes. Additionally, working at the supermarket for 3 years allowed me to obtain a chef's license. Thus, I was able to smoothly start my cooking class. Hannah was delighted. But John only ridiculed me. "Like you could succeed on your own. Who'd pay to learn cooking from you? Stop this futile effort and go find a real job, you hermit." He constantly complained as I prepared for the cooking class. Still, I didn't give up. I am sure that hopefully even John will change his mind. However, success didn't come easily at first. Finding students was hard. Even those who came for a trial rarely became regulars, just as John had predicted. He continued to mock me. "Just get a proper job," he said easily, but considering Hannah's hospital visits and sudden illnesses, it was hard. John still had no intention of accompanying Hannah to the hospital, making it hard for me to start working again. Eventually, I continued the cooking class despite my worries. Then, one day, I had 2 students who attended every cooking class. "Your cooking is very popular with my family. My son doesn't like vegetables, but he ate your cooking the other day." They are such wonderful people. They also brought their friends, and the cooking class finally got off the ground about a year after its opening. Hannah was very happy, but John just looked at me coldly. I could sense that he still felt as if I was an idiot, but he was getting less and less talkative, as if he couldn't say anything. 5 years passed. My cooking class was doing well, albeit slowly. Hannah's health improved with growth, and her visits to the doctor became just annual checkups. We weren't very wealthy, but we were living happily without any major issues. Contrarily, my relationship with John had grown cold. I could distinctly feel his displeasure at my success, and I had nothing more to say to him. When we married, I thought we would be good partners, but things don't always go as planned. Yet, we had been together for so long. I thought we would continue this subdued relationship into our old age, but then one day, something happened. Hannah, a high school student now, came home from school with a troubled look on her face. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" When I asked, Hannah opened her mouth with a serious expression. "I saw Dad walking with some woman I don't know." "Dad? Someone from work? What about it?" "No. They were arm in arm, looking close." I felt the blood drain from my head when I heard her words. It was clear to me it was an affair, but I wasn't shocked about that. I was heartbroken that Hannah had to witness it and get hurt. It might be a misunderstanding. "I'll talk to your father about it." "Sorry for saying something like this." No. Thank you for telling me, even though it was hard. It's not your fault, don't worry about it." I comforted Hannah with a smile, but inside I was seething with anger. That night, sensing the mood, Hannah went to her room early. "Is Hannah going to bed already?" "That's early," John said casually. After a while, I brought up the main topic. "By the way, Hannah said she saw you walking with some woman." "Me with a woman?" "She must have been mistaken." John replied with a thin smile, but I didn't miss the way his eyes darted around. "I'll forgive you, just tell me the truth," I said, staring him down. "There's no truth to tell," he stammered. But as I kept glaring silently, maybe realizing he couldn't escape, he laughed it off. Well, I am attractive, you know? Maybe that did happen. Don't be ridiculous. Do you realize you've hurt Hannah? What's it to you? Always nagging me about money, turning the house into some cooking class without asking. I have no place or comfort in this house. What's wrong with seeking comfort outside? I was speechless at his words. Indeed, running the cooking class at home might have been inconvenient for John. Yet, he never encountered any of my students. He even mocked me, saying things like, "Huh? No one came today? Not very popular, are you, after the classes?" This was despite the fact that I was still cleaning up, highlighting his obliviousness to others' presence. To blame the discomfort he felt at home on my cooking class seemed unfair to me. Moreover, the lack of money wasn't a new issue and was partly due to John himself. Yet, to use that as an excuse for cheating and hurting Hannah is unforgivable. However, the cooking class doesn't bring in enough income for Hannah and me to live on. Knowing that I had no choice but to endure, John said, "If you're unhappy, I'll divorce you. I've been continuing this marriage thinking I'm sparing you, but divorcing you and remarrying her would be better for my happiness. Just wait a minute. Hannah will need money for her education. You can earn it with your cooking class. If that's settled, then it's divorce." John said this and really brought home divorce papers the next day. I was being discarded. No, not just me. John was abandoning his own child, Hannah, too. I negotiated for child support, education expenses, and even filed for alimony for infidelity. Reluctantly, John agreed, so I consented to the divorce. But in the end, I never received those payments, and I was back to scrutinizing my bank account. Yet, even as a single mother, I never forgot to smile and supported Hannah as we lived through it together. It was a tough time, but our misfortune didn't last forever. A few years after the divorce, Hannah, now a working adult, got engaged. Currently, she lives far away for her job. I was at the city hall to get a copy of the family register for Hannah's marriage registration. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "Isn't that the teacher?" A mocking tone. When I looked in response, there he was, John, as expected. "Are you still running the cooking class?" His polite words felt more like mockery. I turned away abruptly. Yeah. Thanks to her agreeing to the divorce, I could marry Jennifer. Got to be thankful, John said. Then, the woman next to John laughed. Yeah. Thanks to her agreeing to the divorce, I could marry you, Jennifer. Got to be thankful. The woman next to him, referred to as Jennifer, appeared to be the mistress Hannah had seen before. Unashamed of getting involved with a married man, and no sign of remorse. Not only did they not pay alimony, but there wasn't even an apology. The woman standing next to John, looking down on me, seemed very wealthy. I couldn't help but notice the brand name bag in her hand. Noticing my gaze, John laughed even more mockingly. Jennifer's parents own a company. You must be envious of this bag, right? It's something you could never afford in your life, isn't it? I'm not envious at all. Acting tough is pointless. How much are you earning now? About $20,000 a year? It seemed John had become arrogant, buoyed by Jennifer's wealth. $60,000. I answered. Oh, $60,000. Not bad. But with an income like that, you can't afford anything decent to eat, can you? John continued to mock me loudly, as usual. Why is he provoking me like this? I glared at him sharply. What's with that look? A poor person earning $60,000 should just get lost. Really, such a scary face. The envy of the poor is frightening. Since you're here at the city hall, why don't you apply for welfare or something? Jennifer joined in, mocking me alongside John. They probably thought I would cry and go home, but I refused to be intimidated by them. Without flinching at their abusive words, I spoke up to both of them. $60,000 is my monthly income. What? An annual income of $60,000? That's not like the old John, you know. I said loudly, laughing. John, as expected, turned red and snapped back at me. What? Back then? Back then? You were always around the $60,000 until we divorced. Really struggled marrying such a vain and poor person. He seemed taken aback by my response. John's trembling figure was almost comical. Now, you're married to a lady who rides on her parents' coattails. That's great for you. An old lady, you say? Jennifer glared at me, clearly offended by my words. Yes. You're only a few years younger than me, right? It's ridiculous that someone your age is still living off your parents because they own a company. Do you even work? Jennifer fell silent at my question. John had nothing to say either. It appeared they were living off Jennifer's parents without working themselves. Realizing this, I couldn't help but laugh. I can't believe he has to support two adults like you. Although he may be the president, he's a pitiful parent. What did you say? John almost raised his hand at me, but seemed to realize what would happen if he did something like that here. He lowered his hand, still frustrated. $60,000 a month, what a big lie. Stop meddling in other people's business, old hag. Oh, it's not a lie. And who started meddling first? How could an old lady like you earn $60,000 a month? At that, I started speaking with a smile on my lips. Jennifer, you don't cook? Cook? We have a maid for that. Don't lump me in with poor people. Our maid's truffle soup cooked with our company's vegetables is exquisite. Jennifer laughed triumphantly at her words, but my smile only grew wider. Is that so? What's with you, creepy? I'm glad you like the dish I created. At those words, both of them looked surprised. After divorcing John, I continued the cooking class. But the cooking class alone wasn't enough to sustain our lives. I had decided to close it down, but amazingly, a student brought many new participants, asking me not to quit. People brought more people, and 3 months after my divorce, my cooking class became so popular that it was hard to get a reservation. I want to spread your cooking to more people. A student who worked at a publishing company suggested that I publish a cookbook. So, I first published a cookbook aimed at housewives. Thanks to the housewives who cooked these recipes and spread them on social media, my books sold incredibly well, even in this era. I also published a cookbook of toddler-friendly recipes I had made with Hannah in kindergarten and budget recipes I created during tough times. Recently, I've been publishing cookbooks of various genres, including some with a more upscale approach. Among them, the truffle burdock rice made with mushrooms and truffle salt has various adaptations and continues to trend on social media. Surely, Jennifer's maid must have seen it and decided to make it. I pride myself that truffle burdock rice isn't something the average person would think of. You came up with it? Yes, that's right. I'm happy that so many people are making it. Jennifer was speechless at my words. Had she made the dish herself, she might have recognized my name as the creator, but it seemed she was just bragging about something made by others. She had no idea that I was the one who created it. Both of them fell silent, probably realizing that my monthly income of $60,000 wasn't a lie. Well, I'm busy, so I'll be going. Their earlier bravado had disappeared. Leaving the deflated pair behind, I finished my business and left the city hall. However, that evening, another incident occurred. John visited my apartment. Since I continued the cooking class after our divorce, I hadn't moved out. Regretting not moving when John showed up, I reluctantly went to the door. Sorry about earlier, he said with a silly grin on his face as I greeted him at the door. What do you want? Well, you know, I supported and helped you with your cooking class, right? We haven't done property division, and I know it's late, but I think it's time we properly split the money. And my bad feeling was confirmed. John had come, apparently with the intention of claiming a share of my earnings. What are you talking about? I don't recall any support from you. All I remember is being continuously ridiculed. There was no support at all. And property division? What are you talking about? You know, you have money, right? We're supposed to split it when we divorce. We didn't divide it at the time of our divorce, so let's do it now. Hearing this, I was at a loss for words. What was he thinking? Why did he believe he had any right to my earnings? It was hard to understand. Yeah. Is Hannah here? She must be all grown up now. Maybe she wants to see me? John, as cheerful as ever, said this and tried to peek inside the house. I closed the door to block his view. Hannah isn't here. Oh. She lives far away. She's getting married soon. Hearing this, John's eyes lit up. I felt torn between thinking it was none of his business and wondering if he was happy for Hannah's happiness. But my thoughts were quickly betrayed. Who's the partner? A rich guy? Well, he's a serious man about his work. Great. Hannah is lucky. She's beautiful like me, so she can easily marry into money. Women have marriage as an escape route, lucky them. I had to suppress the urge to slap John. I had hoped and been let down so many times before. I was foolish to have even a shred of expectation that he might care as a father. It was clear that John lacked even a trace of fatherly affection. The wedding? I'd better keep my schedule open, John said, assuming he'd naturally be invited. Then you'll have to ask Hannah about that, but if you want to meet the man who will be Hannah's husband, you and Jennifer can come over this weekend. You can at least come to say hello. My words seemed to make John quite happy, and he nodded eagerly. Just as I was about to obtain the family register transcript, John had suggested having a meal together. He left, saying he would come back later. I sighed as I watched his retreating figure. Then came the weekend. John arrived at my place with Jennifer. Jennifer, who was clearly an outsider, had me puzzled about her purpose for coming. I decided to let them into the house for now. However, when Hannah and her future husband, Richard, who had arrived earlier, saw the two of them, they exchanged puzzled glances. Why did Dad come? And who's this? It's been a while since we met, and this is how you greet us? You're getting married, right? John smiled and greeted Hannah, but Hannah looked at me with a hint of something to say. So, I smirked and greeted Richard. Richard, this is the father of Hannah, John, my ex-husband, and Jennifer, his current wife. Nice to meet you. Hannah had told him about John being her father and the history of my divorce. Thus, Richard didn't seem too pleased with the two of them. He greeted them with confusion. In the midst of it all, I continued to speak. You see, when we divorced, we didn't do any property division, and I didn't receive any alimony. Well, today isn't the day for that kind of talk, is it? No, it's just the right time. Richard, you're a lawyer, and Jennifer is here too, so I'd like to have a proper conversation. Jennifer rolled her eyes at his words. Then she looked at John as if asking for help. Hannah seemed to understand the real reason I had called John today, and the corners of her mouth turned up. Alimony, you say? I'm listening. Well, based on the cases I've handled so far, in your case, you could probably get around $20,000 in terms of content. $20,000? Jennifer shouted and became flustered. Well, of course. Even if you're wealthy, if you're not working yourself, there's no other option but to rely on your parents. John said it in a miffed tone. You could just subtract that from the property division and give it to me. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at John, who was still saying such things. Richard also said in wonder. Property division? I heard Catherine had no money at all at the time of the divorce. If she didn't then, she does now. The property division is based on the assets formed during the marriage. Richard explains to John in a daze. You only had about $6,000 in savings, so, by simple calculation, you will have to pay $3,000 to Catherine. What? Things went as I had hoped, and I felt a little better. When we divorced, John took all the savings. I was so happy that I could do what I wanted to do. Richard, I want him to pay me exactly what he owes me. May I ask you to intervene? I asked Richard again in front of the two of them. John and Jennifer looked at each other and turned pale at his reply. I later filed a claim in the proper form, but as usual, there was still no payment. However, I could not cause any more trouble for Richard and Hannah. I finally decided to take the last resort. I am going to terminate the contract. I sent a notice to the fruit and vegetable company with which I had been doing business. The fruit and vegetable company had been entrusted with all of my vegetables since I published my book. Sales of meal kits containing the vegetables I use in my cooking have also been favorable. They account for a large portion of that company's revenue, and we have been able to conclude a mutually beneficial contract. It was precisely because of John and Jennifer that I decided to terminate the contract. Sure enough, the president of the fruit and vegetable company came to me immediately with the vice president. Is there something amiss? Your meal kits continue to be well received and we anticipate continued sales. Terminating the contract now is not the way to go. Both the president and vice president looked at me with difficulty and managed to plead with me to continue the contract. Of course, we are grateful to your company for all the help you have given us, but I don't want to be involved any longer. My sharp words made them break out in a cold sweat as they searched for a reason. As if in answer, I told them. To be precise, I don't want to have anything more to do with Jennifer, the president's daughter and the vice president's sister. The vegetable and fruit company I had contracted with was run by the family home of John's wife, Jennifer. Yes. Of course, I didn't know that at first. However, when Jennifer said the vegetables our company handles and that she was the president's daughter, I thought it might be possible. There are not many fruit and vegetable companies around here. So I reviewed the contract and found Jennifer's name on the transcript of the fruit and vegetable company. She was not working. It was obvious that she was a director in name only. I knew that the vice president had a sister, and when I found out that they were family, I racked my brains trying to come to terms with this fact. However, as usual, neither John nor Jennifer were sincere toward me. I felt that it would be unfair for me to continue to be the only one who was being treated with sincerity. I told the president and vice president the facts as they were. It can't be true that Jennifer's husband was your husband. She did such an outrageous thing. The two of them simply apologized flatly, their faces pale. I am sorry. Jennifer's name will be removed from the board. And, Dad, you have to take responsibility for spoiling her. I agree. I am really sorry for what she has done to you. And so, the president resigned. Jennifer's name was erased from the list of directors, and of course she lost her financial support. This Catherine who runs the cooking class here is a hag. Jennifer was so upset that she spent several days shouting this in front of our apartment, but thanks to this, everything about what happened was exposed on the internet. The fruit and vegetable company was in dire straits, but I decided to re-sign the contract with the vice president because of his personality and responsiveness. He kept apologizing to me, but thanks to him, I was able to get the alimony paid without incident. Needless to say, John and Jennifer were not happy. They had not even worked, and what awaited them was a life of poverty with no money. Both of them were abandoned by their families and seemed to be living in a small apartment. How I came to know about this is that Hannah contacted me. Dad asked me to lend him some money. Of course I refused. It was pathetic that she couldn't rely on anyone and had to beg her daughter for money. I think he's working in a day factory now. He shouldn't have quit his job. He must have thought he was rich after marrying that woman and got carried away. Hannah laughed at that. I could finally laugh at the sound of her laughter. John had always been so angry with me, but I thought he had finally put me through hell. I know the pain of living without money. I hope that John will experience that pain this time with his own body. I continued to work well after that. Now, at Hannah's suggestion, I also put my recipe videos on video sharing sites. I am more than happy that people are happy with my cooking. Hannah will soon have a baby. I am thinking of writing a book of delicious baby food recipes.